So this lesson is about gas exchange in single-celled organisms and insects. So we're going to look at how do single-celled organisms exchange gases, how do terrestrial insects balance the need to exchange gases with conserving water, and how do insects exchange gases. So, gas exchange in single-celled organisms. So single-celled organisms like amoeba are small, therefore they have a large surface area to volume ratio. And because of that, their oxygen can just simply diffuse across the body surface, across the cell surface membrane. And then carbon dioxide can just simply diffuse back out across the body surface. And if it's a single-celled organism with a cell wall, then that is completely permeable. So there isn't any barrier to diffusion of gases. So this is a single-celled amoeba, which is a eukaryote and has a large surface area to volume ratio because it's so small, therefore it can diffuse across its body surface. So now looking at gas exchange in insects. So insects have a tracheal system. So you can see that here, and the way in which gases can enter or leave an insect is through these tiny little pores called spiracles or spiracles, which are surrounded by, controlled by valves so they can open and close, a bit like stomata can open and close using guard cells in a plant. So you can see here that the tiny little pore is called spiracle or spiracle. That's where the oxygen comes in and the carbon dioxide comes out. Then the main tube is called a trachea, and then that branches into smaller tubes called tracheoles, and that goes straight into the muscle tissues and delivers oxygen straight into the muscle tissues. Most insects are terrestrial, which means they live on land. They have this problem that they lose a lot of water from their body surface, so they have the tendency to become dehydrated. Very similar to how plants lose water through the stomata. So they need to conserve water, but they also need to exchange gases, which requires a thin, permeable surface with a large surface area. So they're kind of in conflict about the fact they need to get these gases in and out, but at the same time they're also going to lose water. So they need to balance the opposing needs of exchanging the gases with reducing water loss. So they have some things that can help them naturally to reduce the water loss. So they have a waterproof outer covering over their body surface, which is a rigid outer skeleton with a waterproof cuticle. So if you look at beetles, they're very shiny surface. That's because they have a waterproof cuticle. And they also have a shape which is quite a smooth shape, which reduces their surface area to volume ratio over which water can be lost. So as I said before, this tracheal system, the spiracles is where the oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide comes out. Oxygen will then travel down the trachea into even smaller tubes called tracheoles, and they go straight into the respiring muscle tissue. Just a note that you must put an E on the end of the trachea on insects. So the big one is trachea, and then the smaller tubes are called tracheoles. So the processes that drive the movement of gases in and out of the tracheal system is first of all the diffusion gradient. There is a large diffusion gradient because the respiring tissues, the cells in the respiring tissues, are going to use up oxygen during respiration. So there's going to be a low concentration of oxygen in the tissues. However, there's a higher concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere. So oxygen is going to travel down its concentration gradient into the muscle tissue. On the other hand, respiring tissues produce carbon dioxide. So there's going to be a high concentration of carbon dioxide in a tracheole. and a lower concentration in the atmosphere. So gases are going to diffuse down, the carbon dioxide is going to diffuse down its concentration gradient out of the tracheal system. The insect also has movement of muscles as a kind of ventilation system. So this movement of the abdominal muscles creates movements of air in and out of the trachea. So that speeds up the exchange of gases. It kind of squeezes, helps to pump the oxygen through the tracheal system and the carbon dioxide out of the tracheal system. They also have a mechanism which means that they can cope with the changing activity. So when they're flying, they have a different mechanism as when they're at rest. So at rest, so this is the trachea, these are the tracheoles. At rest, the tracheoles, the ends of them have water in them. Okay, and then this is the tissue. However, when the insect starts to become more active, i.e. during flight, what happens is lactic acid starts to build up in the muscle tissue. And that lowers the water potential of the muscle tissue. Therefore, the water is going to move out of the tracheoles down their osmotic gradient. So they're going to move into the tissue because the water potential is lowered in the muscle tissue due to the lactic acid, which means that when they're active, the tracheoles are now, the ends of the tracheoles are now full of air. And diffusion is faster in air than it is in water. So it means that diffusion is a lot faster to get right into the muscle tissues. And that's very important during active flight because they need the diffusion to be fast. Just a little note about spiracles. So spiracles are pores on the body surface of an insect where the gases can enter and leave the trachea. They can be opened and closed by a valve. And the only problem is when the spiracles are open, the water can evaporate from the insect. So most of the time, they're usually actually closed so that they don't lose very much water. And then periodically, they'll open to allow gas exchange. Usually when the carbon dioxide concentration is built up quite high, that triggers the valves to cause the spiracles to open. So periodically, they'll open the spiracles to allow gas exchange. Now, although the tracheal system is very efficient, there are some limitations to the tracheal system. The first is that it relies mostly on diffusion to exchange gases. So if that diffusion gradient isn't there, then they can't do it. Also, for diffusion to be effective, the diffusion pathway must be short, so that limits the size that insects could be. So you don't really see very large insects, really. In the past, when oxygen concentrations in like archaic ages, when oxygen concentration was higher in the atmosphere, there were bigger insects, but at the current 20% of oxygen, you don't really get very big insects. Okay, so that is the end of gas exchange in single-celled organisms and insects.